G'day, guys. Somebody sent me a video about a person called Dr. Richard Fleming, and he's basically an attorney who's studied, probably done a combined degree with a bit of law and the actual medicine. So he can actually litigate medical malpractice, medical issues, and all that. So he's a lawyer with some knowledge, but he's not a virologist. He's not a nutritionist. He's nothing of that sort of stuff. So he's not even, the vegan doctors probably know more about pharmacology and stuff like that. They are proper MDs, full, but even they have believing crackpot ideas. So just because you've got the words MD after your name doesn't mean a lot. It's research and science. It's not expert opinions that matter. Just keep that in mind. Anyway, so let's check this person out. He may actually believe some of this nonsense. So, people believe in all sorts of things. Doesn't make it true or real. So let me just share the screen. So this is in the brand new Tube, which is sort of an alternative to YouTube. And this is the guy here.
If you're a member of the government who's participated in the development of this bioweapon, you're going to be held accountable.
Bioweapon. It's not sounding good, is it?
If it's not done the conventional way, it's going to be done by the general population understanding what's going on. And the general population can make a movement on its own to hold these people accountable. And they're going to.
He went down to inside the actual rabbit hole, the conspiratorial one, and never came out. So yes, he's one of those sort of people that basically thinks the world is all dark, and the reality is, I talk about the elites and talk about all these sort of people in the political elites, and they've been doing it and controlling us for years. They're trying to control us. No, they already control us. Get over it. We're trying to wrest back some control through direct democracy or other things like that. But they already control us. So let's not be deluded about this sort of stuff. Now, he sort of covers about the other, the mRNAs and all that. And he just shows some slides and he talks about motherhood statements that everybody knows, how these vaccines work, which is the viral vector ones and the mRNA types. We've already discussed countless times about their side effect issues, clotting factors and all that. Obviously, the key clotting factor, the more susceptible populations will be those who have got the F5 gene, which is a sort of a Neanderthal type because it predominates in those sort of regions that Neanderthals were. I've checked myself. I don't have it, luckily, which is good. But that is one that makes certain people more vulnerable to clotting factors. So that's just a side issue I thought about throwing in. But let's go to the crux of it.
Your cells into the manufacturing plant for making the spike protein. In the next slide, it looks a little complicated. Most of these slides look a little complicated, but that's the science behind it. What you're looking at here are the red lines and the blue lines. And the red lines show us what the genetic material or sequence is of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And the blue lines show us the proteins that are made, in this case, the spike protein. And what I want to draw your attention to here is this little circle area, because I talked about the prion-like domain, or the part of the spike protein that has a prion to it. And prions cause diseases like mad cow disease and Alzheimer's. And this.
So he's done a leap of faith. So he goes, oh, this has a prion-like domain. So he's jumped from there to mad cow's disease. Wrong. That shows that he basically doesn't understand virology. He just does not understand these sort of viruses, their structures and how they work.
This is the real danger of this spike protein. The virus is nothing more than the delivery system. The spike protein is the actual weapon. That's called.
So he's talking about that the real risk is not the actual virus itself; it's the spike protein with that, prion there that's going to really devastate and turn your head into a mushy domain.
Causing harm. And this occurs slowly and methodically over time. And what you'll notice is that this W formation here is what clues us off to the fact that this is a prion-like domain.
Yes, we know that. And there's research to show that as well. Here it is. Prion, SARS-2 COVID, prion-like domain spike protein enables higher affinity to the ACE2 receptor. So the ACE2 receptor itself has a prion type structure, a protein that actually, and this virus has learned to create something similar on its spike in order to basically adhere better to the ACE2 receptor. So this same characteristic is not only in the vaccines, but is also in the actual virus. So the reality is, either way, you're getting it.
The reason for showing you that is a lot of people have
The reason he's showing you that is to scare the living daylights out of you.
been told that the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are exactly what's in the virus. And once you take and look at the next slide, you will
He goes, and they tell you that the Pfizer and Moderna are exactly what's in the. No, they're not. They're only expressing the spike proteins. That's all. The mRNA code is just for the spike, not the entire virus. So here, this is a misdirect.
realize that they're not.
But we fucking know they're not, because they're not the complete virus. They are just the spike. The actual vaccines are reproducing just the spike, nothing else of the virus. That is why they're not identical.
The virus itself, and this is what the Moderna and this is what the Pfizer vaccine looks like. And all you need to do is compare these red lines, which is the genetics that they say are identical, and you compare it with this one.
No, they're not saying that. They are saying that the spike part is identical.
Moderna and this one with Pfizer, and you can see that the shape of these lines is not the same.
Well, we fucking know that, because they're not the complete virus. They are just the spike that is being replicated, is carried in the replication material, the mRNA material that's inside the lipid nanoparticle that is injected in, goes into the cells and just produces not the complete virus. If it had the complete code, it would produce the complete virus, which is what the virus does. It only produces the spike.
What is the same is the prion region.
Exactly, on the spike, because that's all is identical, because the spike and the prion-like domain are identical to that of the virus.
Have gotten spot on to reproduce.
No, they haven't got it spot on. They've only used the genetic information of just that part. They haven't used the entire genetics of the virus. They've just taken that little snippet of the viral code to just generate the spike and nothing else, not the rest of the virus. God almighty.
Spike protein. So the vaccines do not, we now know they do not have the same thing that the virus is, except for the prion part of the spike protein.
Yes, we fucking know that, because that's all they're creating. They are just have enough code to generate spikes with prions, which are identical to the ones on the virus, but not the rest of the virus. God almighty.
All right. The next slide shows, I just made that comment about we now know that SARS-CoV-2, whether it be from the virus or from the vaccines, reverse transcribes or gets into our human DNA. So transcription is...
Yeah, the virus does, but the only part that actually gets in our system is just that small amount, not the full virus, but a small amount of it.
DNA.
And we only have done studies about the virus itself. He's extrapolating from the virus to the actual vaccine. They're not the same. One just has a bit of code that generates a spike. The other one has the complete code. And from what we've seen is because these coronaviruses, I mean, even flu viruses have incorporated into our genes, in our what we call the junk part of the gene, the genome. These are coronaviruses, and it's not surprising that the actual virus itself, part of it, has been incorporated. That happens with all viruses.
To RNA, and reverse transcription is RNA to DNA. We now know, here's the studies down here. You know me well enough by now to know that I'm going to give you the resource and
No, he's not.
the papers to go read if you're so inclined, or for your doctor or researchers, that this virus, whether it be the virus itself or the vaccines, inserts itself into all but 3 of our 23 sets of chromosomes.
God, he's fucking boring.
Chromosome 8, 15, and 20 still seem to be protected or not transcribed. But we now know that giving this to people will get it into our...
He's just basically, it's a typical way, misdirect, baffling you with a whole lot of details that is just, I could read off any study, just, dribble, but making no
human
sense.
DNA. So all those questions about does it or doesn't it, it does. Here's the slide you were kind of looking for to begin with. This is Novavax. This is the 3rd type. And when they say they're not injecting that genetic code into humans, they're correct.
Exactly, because they're not.
What are they injecting it into? Well, they're taking a different virus called baculovirus, which can't infect people. It infects insects and arthropods.
Exactly.
So somebody came up with an idea to take a virus that can't infect people.
It's a good idea. It basically means, because it's a quicker way. See, traditionally with vaccines, we've basically taken and we've basically used eggs, and that takes time to basically create in that sort of medium to generate enough viral code and then basically purify it and all that. This is a quicker method, using, rather than infecting a human like the other stuff do, because they know that there are issues with these sort of things. What they're doing is they're infecting a moth. I've already explained this in my previous video, and they're literally purifying, taking the spikes and getting rid of all the other stuff, and then just sticking those onto little lipid nanoparticles of lipid, like liposomals. It's not encapsulated, so it can circumvent the immune system, but they're all rafted on, and that means the body knows to recognize this and create an immune response, a localized one.
Put the DNA of the virus into it, inject it into the cells of these moths. This moth, in fact.
Yes, we know.
Where it gets into the DNA of the moth, and then the moth cells make the spike protein.
Exactly.
Those spike proteins
then they get purified, and then they get... So basically what he's trying to say is they create spikes as well. And these spikes are the big, big problem in that regard.
A red stained area. These are
and here he's talking
cells, all this stained material or inflammatory cells. This area.
This is the spongy type effect, nerve damage and death that is actually caused by prions like mad cow's disease.
Here is what's called a Lewy body, and
see, mad cow's disease. So he's already made the association. These spikes that have got these prion-like domains, they are identical prions like the ones that cause mad cow's disease. No proof whatsoever. No studies here. He's just basically showing you, he said, these have got these domains, and then he goes over here and shows you something completely unrelated to COVID, and he goes, oh, here's what mad cow's disease will do if you get prion. You already realize that
It's
this
what
person
causes
is making shit up and he's
Alzheimer's
just a
disease.
crackpot. If he believes this, God almighty, he really has
The next
issues.
slide shows the ultimate bioweapon being prion. So this is our 8th slide.
And he's going, the ultimate bioweapon is a prion that will go in there and decimate your, prion type diseases usually take about 4 to 6 years to manifest. That's basically it in that period. Now, I'm not going to waste my time because he basically makes a whole lot of accusations. Oh, this is a war against us to annihilate us. It's a bioweapon, a prion bioweapon, and all that. Destroy your brain, turn you into a zombie or whatever. So they do talk a bit down here about later on about things about the lockdowns and stuff like that, and I agree with that part. That is legitimate. The reality is with the Delta strain now, it's out of control. They're not going to contain it. The reality is it's going to go around the world. The best thing that they can recommend to people is to improve their vitamin D status, which will protect them from death in a sense, because it will limit the cytokine storm, which is what kills you, not the virus, but the cytokine storm, the overreaction of the immune system that is not properly regulated because of low vitamin D status. Your immune system is full of vitamin D receptors. It needs vitamin D to be regulated properly. But let's get into this. So this study, which we looked at before, this is what they're talking about. SARS-CoV-2 demonstrates, let me leave that. Finally, we identified the prion-like domains in the A1 helix. That's important. That's the structure, the protein structure of the ACE2 receptor. Got it? So the ACE2 receptor has this type of helix prion, and that's what also the virus has. That interacts with a viral receptor binding domain of the SARS-CoV-2. Taken together, the present findings indicate that the identified prion receptor domains in the SARS-CoV-2 receptor binding domain and the ACE2 region that interact with basically the receptor binding domain have important functional roles in viral adhesion and entry. Okay, so they virally adhere much better and provide for better entry. So basically, these viruses have on their spikes, they've got basically these prion-like domains, but they are the alpha helix type. That's important, which allows them to bind and get in much easier, okay, because they have a better affinity to the actual receptor. This was the case also for SARS-CoV-1, the original. They also, MERS COVID, which is the one that was actually in camels in the Middle East, doesn't have, and some of the others don't have either. But these two coronaviruses do, and a number of other coronaviruses do have this prion-like domain. It's an alpha type, and they do have slightly different variations, but they work in a similar way to basically the reason why this is COVID-1 had this style and had less affinity to the ACE2 receptor. That's why another reason why the original COVID didn't propagate through the population as effectively. Okay. Now, the COVID-2 does have this, an improvement, and actually can bind much better and get in. Now, you've seen that. I can show you basically colorful structures just to baffle you like he did, but I'm not going to bother doing all that sort of shit. Anyone who wants to read the study, they can read the study. Let's look at what prions are so we understand them. How prions fold. This is very important. Okay. Prions are proteins that occur naturally in the brain of animals and people. They exist. They've existed before humans existed. Normally, the proteins are harmless, exactly, but when they are misshapen, then they cause devastating illnesses such as BSE disease in cattle and CJD in humans, which is what we call mad cow's disease. Now, what type? Okay, the normal prion is an amino acid in alpha helix. Okay? Alpha 1 helix. Got it? The disease type, which is like the mad cow's disease, is an amino acid in beta helix, different structure. That's why that's not a problem. That is. It's the same thing. Look, we have prions, bacteria, viruses, protozoa, and all sorts of other mini small organisms in our body. They are either beneficial. Some prions can be beneficial. Neutral, that means they're just, hitching a ride with us, or pathogenic. The beta helix ones are a problem. The alpha ones aren't. So COVID is an ahelix. So basically, your brain isn't going to turn into a spongy mess. So whether you get the vaccine or whether you basically get COVID itself, in 5 years' time, the entire human race isn't going to turn into a bunch of morons that'll die out. So it's not going to happen. It's bullshit. Okay? This guy and a lot of other people are going to jump on this. Oh, it's going to cause mad cow's disease. No, it's not. It's not going to cause anything of the sort. It's a prion, but it's not a pathogenic type. And there are a number of receptors, sites in the human body that actually use the A helix type and cause no problems whatsoever. Nothing to worry, nothing to of real importance here. But when crackpots basically say, "Oh, look, it's got a prion," and most people think about prions or think about mad cow's disease, and there's mad cow's disease, and then he shows you the mad cow's disease suffering, and so he wants you to connect the two to make this linguistic association as if it is a true association, which it's not. It's bullshit. So don't worry. You want to protect yourself, maintain a good vitamin D status, as I've always said, and you'll be fine in that regard. Like my dear Mira, she's fine with vitamin D. COVID did not take her out of this world. So keep your vitamin. Now, if you have to basically, as I've said, you're forced to use something, Novavax is your safest option. So if you need to basically travel or basically work in a certain field where you could potentially lose your job, but you need to take something, that's probably the least. But as I said, with everything, you need to maintain a good vitamin D status, because a vitamin D status will basically regulate the immune system properly. And there's not going to be an issue there. But that's pretty much it. Alpha helix prions do not cause disease, basically. So nothing to worry about. And if you hear any other crackpot mentioning any other thing, please email me and please let me know so I can do a video and demonstrate to you with good science and good information why these people are making shit up. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it. Anyway, see yous.